Welcome to this podcast of Crossing Barriers, Building Friendships from Peace Lutheran Church in Spring Hill, Tennessee. Our guest today is Lisa Samson, and she is an author of many, many books. Lisa, thanks for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Ann.
So, about how many books would you say you've written?
I was thinking about that the other night, and not counting ones that are in process, 46.
46. That's amazing. So I did some counting myself, and I have that you have 4 different series, and each series has at least 3 books in it, 16 novels, 3 books that are nonfiction, and then I'm not sure how to categorize the series of books called Songs of Light. How would you categorize those?
I would say Songs of Light are ministerial books, like they are meant to minister to a specific group of people. Each book has a certain group of people that goes to. So one is people that are at the end of life. One is people who are in critical condition. The next one that's out is people who are contemplating suicide or are really slipping down into the depths of despair. We just wrote one and those are for a broad audience, and it's basically just.
Here the connection went bad, and Lisa finished by saying, using metaphor for the lavish love of God on people without apology. So I want to say that I have just quickly read through some of those books that are in Songs of Light, and I really love them. And I'm thinking I need to buy several of them and just to have on hand to give to folks that are struggling with the 3 issues that you just mentioned. But what I really wanted to ask you about is how do you come up with the storyline for your stories?
I always use this metaphor. I get one little piece of something, and it's like the lint in the dryer trap. As it goes around, more pieces collect and more pieces collect until I have a basic idea of what the story is about and who the main character is. So I write character-driven novels. And it just develops, and I'm working on one now in my mind, and I've got the place, and I've got that there are 2 people, but I don't know exactly who they are yet. And I'm trying to find the best set of circumstances a person can be in to fit the situation that I have already dreamed up. So it would be either the hardest for them or the most exciting journey, because if a person has already realized certain things, they're not going to be an exciting fit. So they have to be dumb in all the right ways. Or clueless, right?
I read The Sky Beneath My Feet, and a long time ago I quit reading so-called Christian novels because I felt like they were sappy. I felt like they were full of platitudes, and I felt like that if you just love Jesus enough or have enough faith or pray hard enough, that you get the fairy tale and you live happily ever after. And that to me is not my experience with the Christian faith journey at all. So I really appreciated that book was not like that. How have your books transformed you?
Well, my books are a reflection of my transformation. They're not what transforms me. So for instance, I have one called, oh my goodness, isn't that terrible? I can't remember what it is, but it's about a woman whose husband died, and she is processing her grief. And that was written around when I lost my mother. And so I guess you could say that one actually did transform me. I was able to work through my grief through this character. It's called The Living End. And but at other times, it's things that I have already been through. One that is called Quaker Summer. My then husband and I had really gotten into expressing our faith in terms of justice and compassion, social justice and compassion and love for those that needed people to show up in physical form to help. And so we moved our family down to inner city Lexington, Kentucky, and we became part of a new monastic community. And so we got plugged into all sorts of different ways in which to serve. And so Quaker Summer was a reflection of what I was going through, and what I had already come to grips with in my own life and my own walk of faith. So, they can go either way.
Sometime we'll have to talk more about monastic communities and being a part of that and what that's like. I would love to do that. Several of the books that I saw, the woman, her husband is a pastor or decides to change his life to become a minister somewhere. And I was thinking, what about writing a book where the pastor is a woman?
I know, right? At that point in time, when I was writing, in the thick of writing those novels, and that really ended probably about 12 years ago, maybe even 14, where I was in a certain mold, and particularly the publishers that I was with, and that would not have been acceptable. So I would do it now in a heartbeat. And I feel like that realm, I was in the more traditional evangelical realm of publishing. Even that is getting broader and broader. But no, if I had been at a different house, I certainly could have done that. I think part of what I do, though, is I tend to like to be in a place with my characters that I understand a little bit better. And I've never been a pastor.
Well, I can help you with that.
I know, that's great. Maybe the character that I'm looking for in this book I'm thinking of needs to be a pastor.
You are incredibly prolific. You have written so many books. What's kind of the discipline that you go through to produce those books? It looked like in one year you had like 5 books published.
I did. That was the year my husband was getting his PhD. My ex-husband was getting his PhD. So I took on a multi-book contract for a young adult series, and then I was, at that point, I was getting contracts for my novel. So I had 2 things going, and I just did it. My best work at that point in my life was done during the middle of the night. So I would start around 10:30 or 11, and I'd go till 5 in the morning and then sleep till noon. And my kids were old enough that I could do that. And so that's how I did it. I can get like a lot of writing in when I do it that way. Now I find that these songs of light that I'm doing, I do those early in the morning. So I have flip-flopped my time schedule, and I'm in bed early and I wake up sometimes at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I write and, just have that nice quiet time, which I can't live without that now.
So you've been writing books for a long time. So how would you say the essence of your books have changed over the years?
I think I started out wanting to say what I thought people should hear. And I'm just a fallible human being with a very limited consciousness, right? Like, it doesn't matter who the smartest human being here on this planet is, we're still paling in comparison to whatever higher consciousness is there, right? I mean, so I got away from the shoulds, and I got to more of what we are allowed as eternal, divinely apportioned beings to receive. And that's a whole different equation than what you should be doing, what you should be thinking, all those sorts of things. And so that's the biggest difference, is what are we allowed to receive, and what will we allow ourselves to receive, whether that is our own divine nature or the divine nature of others. So it becomes more of an acceptance, an alignment, a realization, rather than here's what you should do to attain, to grasp at, to succeed at. And I think that's the biggest change in my writing.
I love the way you say that. That's beautiful. One of the things that I really appreciate you is you really are gifted with words, not only in your books, but even when we did our little Christmas messages at church, just your quick little 7-second message. I thought, wow, she said it very succinctly and passionately in just a small amount of time. You really do good things
I've been
with
edited
words
a lot. So now I edit myself really well because I've had a lot of editing in my life.
Well, one of the things that I did is I ordered the book Embrace Me for my mom and had it sent to her because you had told me that that was one of your favorite books. And I read the little blurb on about Embrace Me, and it classified you as an artisan of hope. And what do you mean by that?
Well, I feel like hope is something that is overrated in its way that we have understood it as this thing we do, just clinging to the possibility that maybe this time it's going to work out for us. But when we are artists of hope, we become something very different, and that becomes a expression of our faith. And our faith, when it becomes not in who we are or our own faith, but in God's faithfulness. So faith isn't our thing, it's God's thing. It's our faith in God's faithfulness. And when we have that kind of faith, then our hope becomes something living. It's not a thing where, well, maybe this, maybe that, I hope this will happen, I hope that doesn't happen. It is a living faith. That hope is knowing that God is here for our good. He's here to reunite, to recollect, to reconcile, to unify, to bring together that which is God. And that is what hope is to me. So now how that plays out in my life, in my actions, in my words, and in my thoughts, which is the real kicker, that's the hardest thing to overcome, is because we tend to hold each other in contempt, from the small to the grand. And when we do that, of course, we tell God he's not doing a good job. And so that's where I'm working right now, is with my mind and prescribing things for everybody, but to have hope for them, to have hope that God is faithful to the most, what we would claim, awful of human being, who still is a manifestation of the divine in form. And so hope includes everything, and faith in God's faithfulness to complete it.
Awesome. What are some of the issues that you have wrestled with in your books or dealt with or wrote about?
Well, I definitely have dealt with grief. That would be the living end. I wrestled with addiction in a book called Straight Up. My character was addicted to alcohol. I have wrestled with the feelings of lack in oneself, even when one is in a place of great bounty. So personal poverty as opposed to possessional wealth. because it's so easy for us, especially in this internet age where we see people with all the bells and whistles on their feeds and stuff like that. And people are really buying into personal possessions as wealth, and yet we know that there are many lonely rich people. We see the most popular uh, personalities in despair and taking their own lives. So that poverty of self, in the midst of great possession, is a very much something that I like to explore, because I have that problem of looking outwards and thinking, well, if I had all this money, I'd be doing this and that and blah, blah, blah. I wouldn't have to worry about this and that. But meanwhile, my interior life is getting better and better. Like, God has been so faithful to commune and to say, I'm going to give you the real wealth, and don't worry about that other stuff, because I am the provider. So that is another theme that comes in. I did have a book of a pastor's wife who was dealing with the fallout of infidelity, her own. And, it just depends. There's all of them have some kind of theme to them. I think Embrace Me, which is one of my absolute favorites, is the theme that we are somehow malformed from the beginning. I used to think that, what's that doctrine where we come in depraved already? What is that name? Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. It's not the total depravity of Calvinism. It's that Augustine brought it in, I believe, where we're born with a deficit. Like, we come in and we're already sinners. We're already separated from God. We're already, blah, 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 blah. And then I was like, I don't think that's true. I just don't think that's true. And so I began to explore that. And so I have explored that theme and Embrace Me, that there is no such thing as somebody that is completely and utterly without God, and then we have to find our way back. Like, it's up to us. It's not up to God, who created us and is all in all. So then I'm like, I think I'm not giving God enough glory and credit for being the sustaining provider, all in all, and so that book really explores gosh, I wish I could think of what that doctrine is called. It's so simple. But anyway, I know
as soon as we get off the podcast, you'll remember it.
Of course.
So I was thinking about John Grisham, who's a lawyer, and of course, all of his books, almost all of them, are about a lawyer gets into trouble. And I think he takes like a story that was in the news and then kind of builds something around that. So I'm thinking, are your characters, are the issues that they struggle with issues that you have struggled with? Or is it kind of like, I don't think a doctor has to have cancer in order to treat cancer patients. So
yeah.
It seems like you really know what you're talking about, though, when people are struggling with these issues.
Oh, yeah. I think I am, they come from me, but they also come from my ability to translate the things I have gone through down to the absolute kernel of the emotion, whether it's separation, because our belief in separation, a separation from one another, separation from God, which is totally false, will manifest itself in many ways. So what I can do is take that feeling and I'm able to translate it into other ways that it flowers. And so, yeah, it is all about me and all about my experiences, but I just am able to take it from one language into another because, and I think that's what a novelist and a storyteller is able to do, is you get down to the very kernel, the very core of what the issue actually is and not how it presents. And then from there, it can go anywhere.
So do you also intentionally put yourself in situations where you get to experience other people's life experiences or hear about their stories?
No,
Okay.
I don't. I wish I did. There's where I don't have the discipline, but somehow it always comes. People come into my life, and I get to experience. I would say that when we did intentional community, in the new monastic thing that sprouted up in the early 2000s, that was intentional. And we did mean to put ourselves in people's lives. Now I'm single, I'm older, my kids are grown. I find that God brings to me the people that God wishes to appear as in front of me, for me to serve, for me to learn from and grow from. So it's more of an organic thing. And that's pretty much the way my life has always been run. And even the way I write is more of a seat of the pants thing. I don't plot everything out ahead of time. I have a basic idea. I've got point A and point Z, and then maybe a G and an R in between, but the rest is just going to go how it's going to go.
The rest is just dryer lint, huh?
Dryer lint. And that's how my life really has been. And I finally learned to trust that process because, so many self-help books and people say, oh no, you got to have a 5-year plan. I would love for everybody who has ever had a 5-year plan to go back to the beginning of it and say, is this what happened? I bet you, I don't even know what the percentage of people that it wasn't that way. It didn't turn out that way.
So this is a pragmatic question. I always thought of someone who had 40 some odd books published as, just being financially wealthy, that was cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And so tell me dispel that myth for me.
Well, you get a small percentage of the book, which is not even half of the cover price. So you get a small percentage of what the publisher charges the retailer. And then it's to really make it, you have to sell an amazing number of books. So, and you have to be, if you don't, then you have to be prolific and mild, like a medium amount of success. I've had several books which sold enough to keep me afloat for 6 to 8 months. And that's about it.
Wow. Well, that was going to be my next question. So does your writing, quote unquote, pay the mortgage?
It has at various times, but mostly not. It's really don't quit your day job. When I was 50, I went into massage therapy so that I could have a regular source of income. And that's been great. And then I get to meet people and hear their stories. Of course, it's confidential. So I would have to just disguise anything. It would be so different, it wouldn't be recognized. And I haven't done that yet. But, people's lives and their songs that they sing when they tell them, they bear an imprint on the creativity of someone who is actively in the creative process. Even if you don't assign the whole thing, it does bear a fingerprint. But yeah, so I went into massage therapy, which I absolutely love. It keeps me afloat, and it keeps me active and in the community and being with people, which I do love. Writing can be very, very reclusive. And after my children were grown or, doing their own thing, writing was very hard for me because I wasn't getting that sense of community and that sense of peopleness with just writing. And I really couldn't do it for many years in a way that provided any stability whatsoever. Or, I went for many years, maybe 8 without being published. So it is definitely not lucrative unless you're John Grisham.
That's the exception.
You have to do it because you want to do it, not because you think it's going to be a thing, because it's not worth it unless you unless you know you can do it. Having an idea, like a lot of people will, I have an idea you should use and you should write, or I want to write a book. And I just think to myself, oh, bless your heart. Like, that's, would you write my book for me? And I'll
Yeah,
give you
that's really what they're
50%
saying.
of the profits. I'm like, I wouldn't even want 50%. I wouldn't do that to anybody, even with my own stuff. That's not much of a promise at all.
So, when your books actually get read on Audible, does that mean you've kind of hit a benchmark?
No,
No.
no.
'Cause
That's just you put up an audiobook, you've done the work, or your publishing house has done it, and they just plug it in the Amazon big machine, and there it is. So it's not anything on Amazon. As you know, you could put your cat up on Amazon.
There have been a couple of books that I have wanted that were not available as an audio book, and so I thought you must have had enough readership to put it as an audio book.
I did, at the ones that do have an audio book. That's what I said. If the publisher, I did have them during the heyday of my career. I had a few audio books put up, and then we did one with the Christmas book series that I'm working on with Leonard Sweet right now. It's the first one we did an audio book, and I was the narrator, and I had always wanted to narrate one of my own stories. So that was really fun.
So what are some of the biggest barriers you encounter in writing your books?
Probably my own sense of whether I am doing the right thing. Is this the right story? I mean, you can second guess yourself to death. That's a huge barrier if you don't have the confidence you need to just plow right through. Once you get it, though, you get it. And you know you can always go back and change things. So second guessing yourself is a massive barrier. And I think that just stands to reason in most areas of our life. When we're just sitting there second guessing ourselves, we're not moving forward. I think the wondering if it's going to be a success or not has been a barrier. And saying, if this is not going to support me, if this is not, like, using the financial aspect of it as a mark for success, whether it's successful or not, that's definitely a barrier, because I can't say I've gotten rich off this thing at all. But what I can say is I received a note that told me somebody didn't take their life because of a book of mine they read. Now, I take great comfort in that, and I take great joy in knowing that how God chooses to use my words, once I let go of them and they're out there in the world, that God will absolutely do that, and I don't have to worry about that. So using monetary success as the bar of success is definitely a barrier. But I've learned that, it's just silly for me to look at it that way, because that's just not how it has been. And then I would say another barrier has been me worried about what the reader's going to think. And am I going to make somebody mad? Am I going to offend somebody? And especially in the arm of publishing that I had been in. And anytime you get church people together, you're going to have a sense of entitlement that they want it the way they think it should be, the way they think is right, the way they think God is. And so when you start kowtowing to everybody else's shoulds and what they think is truth, then you're scattered. What do you really have to say? You can only speak from your own experiences. And unfortunately, in the religious realm, particularly Christianity, I have found that what we think is true, and propositions and these truths that can be spouted in words, are more important than our experiences of God. And as you know, you can write what a birth is, but until you have a baby, you don't know what it's like to have a baby. So the experience of who God is, not just what God says, is very much looked on with distrust.
Mm.
And it is the one thing a human being can know is their experience, because they have lived it.
Mm-hmm.
And so anytime you're distilling anything down into words, including a story, it becomes fair game. And you can second guess that game, and you try to stay, like head them off at the pass. Well, if I say it this way, then they're going to have nothing to say. And all you're doing basically is arguing with people while you're just trying to create. So instead of doing that, you could just, and that has been very recently that now I'm able to do that. But that was probably the biggest barrier that I had, was trying to please people that really kind of are looking for what's wrong.
Yes. Yeah. So you kind of touched on this. In what ways have you created friendships through your writing?
Oh, well, with other writers, for sure. That's a fun thing, because they all know how kooky we are and how lost in our heads we can get. And they don't see it as a bad thing. And then readers. I have just had I've become real friends with readers, and that I know in real life now. And even those that I have just come to know electronically, they have been a real blessing to my life. And so the relationships that I've been able to build through doing this, it's just like anything, right? If you're a nurse or a doctor or a pastor, you're suddenly in a community of people, and you find that they change you, and you can be changed for the better, or you can be changed into a way where you forget who you are and forget who God is, until somebody else comes along and lifts you back up again. But we're all a reflection. We can be a reflection of the good that surrounds us. And hopefully that is what I have most taken from this life of writing, is to reflect the good in the people that have read my words, that have helped me write them, and that write words too.
Tell the story of how you found your way to Peace Lutheran Church.
Well, I had been away from church for quite a long time. I was part of the great big church that had been coming under fire because of the pedophilia. And I saw a documentary about two women who went to Rome and wanted to lay their sorrows before the powers that be, and they were turned away. And I said in that moment, it was 2010, if they're not good enough for the great big church, then neither am I.
Mm.
And I walked away. Now, I had also been in evangelical Christianity for years. I've done all sorts of flavors of the church, and it's been served me very well as a writer. I know that was part of my journey, is to be involved with very, very varying sects of the church. And I dove into more Eastern ways of thought, mysticism, and I found God in ways that were very, very different, but very, very powerful and loving and intimate. And then one day I felt like I needed to go back. And so I heard, like, Jesus has always been very important to me, and I've always felt a deep communion with Jesus. And I just heard, go ahead, I want you to go back and go ahead and keep the sacraments, but you don't have to confess to anybody. That's my job. And I said, okay. And so I went back into the great big church, and this was in Florida when I was spending time with my sister, and it was wonderful. I just sat in the pew, big. It was during the pandemic. Nobody was really doing anything but smiling under their mask and using hand sanitizer, social distancing. And so then when I came back to Tennessee, I went to another church, another great big church, and it was good for me to just sit and be. I wasn't approached, I wasn't talked to, I wasn't welcomed, but I didn't want to be. I didn't want to step in and fellowship. I just wanted to be where, because this is what Jesus said. When people gather in my name, searching and gathering in me, I am there in a force that is very different from when it's just you and I. And I said, okay, I can see that. I can see that. And so when I would sit in church, and still now, I feel the collective presence of the Christ, not just as Jesus, but that is in all of us. And then I was like, I want a little bit more fellowship. And one of the things that God uses to show me where I should be is a lighthouse. And when I went back into the great big church last winter, there was a song about lighthouse that day. And then I said, I want a little bit more. I want more fellowship. I want to get to know people. And so I said, I'm going to go to the closest church that isn't a church that closes itself off and separates itself from the rest of the world. And so there's one right across the street from the farm I live on, but they do have that us against them mentality. And so I just know that isn't for me. So Peace Lutheran was the closest church. And I thought, okay, all right, so be it. That's the one I'm going to try. And I walked in and I was so welcomed by everybody. I was talked to more in that day than I had been talked to in the whole year. And there was this beautiful Thanksgiving dinner. And lo and behold, there was a song about a lighthouse. And so here I am. I'm like, all right, well, there's a lighthouse. I'm not going to question. And I've been enjoying the fellowship. I've really enjoyed the Sunday services, taking communion again. Your messages are encouraging. And, they don't beat around the bush, because we're all adults and we all wish to improve and move forward in our lives. But you say things in such a loving way. And so that's how I ended up at Peace Lutheran.
I love the serendipityness of the story of how you ended up there. That's great.
Yeah, it is cool.
So to wrap up our time together, what do you want people to walk away with after reading one of your books?
The only message I truly have at this time, and I don't know if all of my books from the past would do this, but I can tell you the thing that I wish people would take away, and hope they do, is the sense that they are infinitely and eternally loved by a good, kind, and caring God.
Beautiful. Well, I think that sums up our time together. Let's just leave it right there.
All right.
Thanks, Lisa, for being a part of our podcast. We really enjoy it.
Thank you, Anne. I enjoyed it too. And blessings on this venture and all you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for being here.
You're welcome.